So that's 125 million people that are coming into the state of Florida for tourism purposes. Some of you are here for that. But, you know, the most visited place on the planet is actually Orlando, Florida. So they are coming into the state, as you can imagine, to visit Disney and the other facilities that are there. But thanks to our visitors, we don't have a state income tax. So we welcome our 125 million plus visitors, and we expect to grow them to about 150 million by 2030 because they do pay for the state income tax. So as residents of the state of Florida, you pay zero state income tax. But they also contribute billions of dollars to our economy. Last year was about $12 billion that visitors contributed to our budget here in the state of Florida. So in as much as we look at it as a business state and we are growing our economy and diversifying our GDP, visitation is a big part of what our economy is, and it contributes to other projects to grow the economy. In terms of trade, most of our states, there's bigger trade states than Florida. You would assume that Florida probably trades a lot more than others, but Florida ranks 7th among all U.S. trade states. So California, Texas, New York being the bigger trade states in the U.S., but Florida is 7th, so we're among the top 10. Increasingly, we are trading much more. So merchandise trade is about $153 billion. Now, 80 billion of those dollars are with Latin America, which is no surprise. We are the gateway to Latin America. The bulk of who we trade with is our Latin American neighbors. Brazil, Central America, Mexico, South America are our primary trading partners, to include the Caribbean. We do export a lot of product, but most of it is pass-through. Florida is a trade and logistics state. We have 14 deep water ports. For one state, that's a lot of ports. But we do have 19 commercial airports and 2 spaceports. So we're also in the space industry, and Cape Canaveral area is consistently working towards growing that industry sector, and that's been based out of private sector investment. So a lot of what happens in the Cape Canaveral area after NASA left was based on private sector investment. So, you know, think of Elon Musk and Blue Origin, Boeing, and a few other companies that have transformed the Space Coast. And we are sending exports into space. So that's kind of a new thing. Very few states have spaceports, so Florida is exporting products into space. We do have a brand made in Florida that is exporting products into the International Space Station. So we trade galactically here in the state of Florida, which is something that is unusual for most states, and that's something that we are particularly proud of and we're looking to grow. But with all of our ports and our airports, we do have a tremendous amount of opportunity. We certainly have diversified who we trade with. So while most of our trading partners are with Latin America, we do a fair amount with Europe. Some of our top trading partners are European nations. The UK, Germany, France, and Spain are amongst our top trading partners in Europe. UK is our #1 investor, foreign direct investor into the state of Florida. So they are about 650 UK-based companies in the state of Florida. After the UK is Canada. In terms of foreign direct investment, they have 400 plus Canadian-based companies here in the state of Florida. Then we have Germany and France and others, but most of our investors are European. So while we move a lot of merchandise product through Latin America, our investment comes from Europe, and some of our biggest visitors, visitation after the Canadians, are European visitors. So that's a little bit about the international portfolio for the state and how we trade.
And can you just add anything about Eastern Europe, about how that goes?
So it's an emerging area. We don't do as much with Eastern Europe. The numbers are, you know, with Poland are still in the millions. It's not a billion-dollar trade. Most of what we do with the central, you know, it's France and Germany that are big, the big trading partners for us in that region. UK coming in further down, it's been fluctuating, and of course we're watching Brexit, not only because the UK is an important trading partner for Florida, but it's our top investor. But the bulk of our trade is really with Germany and France, to a certain extent with Italy and Spain, but we don't really do a lot with Central Europe. And part of it has been, as we shared with Patrick and others, is there's been a lack of education of what may exist in Central Europe, what the opportunities are in other parts of Europe. Not that there hasn't been curiosity. We did have a Florida delegation that was at the Warsaw Security Forum last week. So our head of Department of Economic Opportunity was there as a speaker, and there was a few other Floridians that were there also participating. So part of it is understanding what the region has to offer, you know, connectivity to other parts of Europe, diversifying who we trade with, and as we know, you know, as recessions happen, economic fluctuations happen, having diversification in our trading partners helps sustain an economy. So looking at diversifying those opportunities is certainly something that we look forward to doing.
First, I would say I'm not a stranger to Warsaw. Until November of 2017, for 15 years, our consulting firm had an office headquartered in Warsaw that did custom and trade compliance work throughout the European Union. And that platform was more than a law firm really ought to be dealing with, and so UPS acquired that in 2017. But we still have many good friends in Warsaw, and we still do work there and throughout the European Union. The question about doing trade, for the more than 40 years that I practiced law in this area, we've dealt with importers and exporters who figured it was easy to buy and sell and ship goods, only to find out that there are regulations they hadn't anticipated. And so we're bailing people out of problems. In the current environment, those regulatory issues and the tariffs are no longer buried in books that no one reads. They're on the front page of newspapers all over the globe. So now people are intimidated about importing and exporting because of all the rhetoric that surrounds the changes in the tariff laws and the trade laws and the restrictions. So the environment has changed dramatically, and that may account for some of the problems that people encounter. My message really is that despite all those issues that we read about in the papers, trade has still been growing, perhaps not as fast as it had been for a while, but it's still growing. The opportunities are still there, and there are ways to anticipate what those issues are and to build your business around them. And one of the things that's interesting when you talk about imports and exports, in the United States, we've traditionally enforced our laws with the importers. Increasingly, we enforce them with the involvement of the exporters. So we've exported our requirements abroad, and if you think about it, if you're exporting food to the United States, there are now there are now food supply verification programs and registrations of the foreign suppliers. Agriculture products coming in here, more often than not, the growers outside the U.S. are more trained in how to prepare their products to comply with the U.S. law, and there's an outreach by the federal government on those sorts of issues. The information systems, when you export, there's advanced information that's now provided electronically, so that when, if you're doing that right, when your goods hit the border, they clear more immediately because the people at the border and the government know what's already on board the vessel or the aircraft. And the reverse applies on exports that go out of the United States into the European Union. So to me, there's a great reality here in ways that you can create opportunities and anticipate those problems. But we do live in an era where the increased enforcement mantras are there more often than not. The forced labor, intellectual property, anti-dumping duties, there are more actions being brought now than there have been in decades. And the companies that become compliant and re-engineer often have an invitation to greater audits. So to my mind, these are all anticipatable issues that companies can work on and understand how to deal with. The thing that's most talked about here in the front pages of the newspaper are all the China tariffs, going up from 10% to 15% to 25% to 50% to 35%. One fact that people have not read about in the papers is that there were over 10,000 petitions filed by companies to exclude their products. 6,000 of those petitions were approved. So if you think about that, I would not have predicted that 60% of the petitions filed for exclusions from those increased tariffs would have been approved, but they were. And there's an ongoing process on that. And you think about Central Europe, you're probably not so concerned about the China tariffs. But on the other hand, we have the Boeing case that was just decided by the WTO, And so the U.S. has now listed over 200 tariff items that they're going to increase the duties on October 18th. That's right around the corner. Central Europe is not the big target there, but there are Central European products at the tariff line item level that have been identified. There's not an exclusion process at this point, but there might very well be. This is one of those, again, anticipatable issues as to what the costs are and how those costs might be shared between exporters and importers. And again, this is a two-way trade issue because the European Union is looking at what authorities it has to immediately impose their list of retaliatory duties on U.S. products. And the Airbus case that's pending to be decided in 2020 will very likely be approved and gives a new authority for retaliatory duties, both to be imposed by Europe, and then the U.S. will be looking at it again. So we have that trade environment that we're working on where if you are paying attention to where the changes are, there are different ways that you can anticipate them and to structure your business to take them into account. And the fact that it's on the front pages now, we have more clients than we've ever had in the past who are planning in advance as opposed to going to a law firm to bail them out of an unanticipated problem. So that's my message of encouragement. We can talk more later about what the possibilities are.
What that means. Okay, so how does the Polish government look at all of this? You're the one best placed to tell us.
One thing which is, I think, important about the Three Seas initiative, on one of the slides of Mr. Brzezinski, he mentioned the recent meeting, ministerial meeting of Three Seas that took place in Warsaw. This is important because, as you know, in Europe, we have a bit different political systems. So, because the Three Seas initiative was the initiative of the head of states, of the presidents. And the presidents, in reality, they have no real power in our region. The governments have. The governments conduct the economic policy. So this is a significant change, and the fact that we have a kind of plenipotentiary of the Polish government for Three Seas initiative. This is Minister Kwieciński, Minister of Investment and Economic Development. So he organized this meeting, and I believe the fact that he gathered ministers from the region, not presidents, not people who talk about political issues only, but ministers who have tools, who have power to implement things. This is very, very important. And the second comment is about the transatlantic cooperation. This is, we have also Mr. Sandler mentioned that we have quite big tensions right now. The relations between EU and the US could be better. That's we have
That's diplomatic.
We have some trade problems. The tariffs, we have tariffs on steel and aluminum. There is a threat that the tariffs on cars, on European cars, will be introduced. We have Mr. Sandler mentioned the Boeing and Airbus case. So I think now we have the Airbus case and the duties that the U.S. administration will most probably introduce on October 18th. Next year, maybe the EU side will do the same, unfortunately, because the EU wanted to avoid this situation and wanted to negotiate and to find a solution. But I believe that this Three Seas initiative is a perfect place and perfect initiative for developing good transatlantic ties and cooperation. Mr. Brzezinski mentioned this is a strategically important region. China is very much interested in the region. You of course, everybody heard about the Belt and Road Initiative. So this region is crucial for this Chinese initiative. But we believe it would be great if Central and Eastern European countries could be a place for this enhanced transatlantic cooperation between the European Union and the US, because all sides will benefit with that. Now, coming to the trade relations. Well, it's worth to mention that right now Poland's trade is very much focused on the European Union. It's not nothing strange. It's quite obvious because there is no trade barriers within the European Union. So about 80% of our export goes to other European Union countries, only 20% to all others. And the United States, of course, are one of the most important trading partners outside of the European Union. And actually, the last 2 years were very, very successful. We had a double-digit growth, 2017, 2018. So we came up from the level of around $10 billion of turnover in goods to $15 billion. There are some differences in statistics between Polish statistics and the US. This is very important because it's important who has the deficit, right? And so the US side says that they have deficit in trade with Poland. We think that we don't. That we have the deficit with the US. The problem is probably because some of the goods exported from the US are not that reach Poland are not indicated in the US statistics. So they come to Poland probably through other countries. So they are exported, I don't know, to Port of Rotterdam, to Germany, to other destinations, and they then come to Poland. So last 2 years were very successful. This year probably will be a bit less successful, but this is because I think overall problems in trade right now, the climate is not very favorable for that, and there is a slowdown in general in trade. But anyway, we believe that still the trade with Poland, the US trade with Poland will grow. Maybe not double digit, but there will be a growth. But anyway, we are still, as I said, $15 billion. It's not bad, but we are the 40th US trade partner. So it's much below our ambitions and expectations. So we have excellent political relations, as you know. We cooperate very closely in defense sector. We have the documents were signed about enhanced presence of US troops on Polish soil, as you all know. But so those $15 billion is definitely not enough. We have a lot of work to do to increase it. Maybe a few words about the trade with Florida. As Alice already said, it's not significant, unfortunately. I think if we are talking about the US trade with Poland, the Florida is only about 3%, unfortunately. And if we are talking about the Polish trade with Americas in general, so 3/4 is United States and Canada. 3/4 of Polish export to all American countries goes to United States and Canada, and about 60% of import. So there is a huge space for improvement in this area.
I'm not the one to talk to about regulatory issues. It's not my area of expertise, but this is something that comes up regularly in discussions on 3Cs, because it's nice to talk about the 50,000-foot level like I just did today. But when you get down to and actually start talking about building a highway that crosses from Poland into Slovakia or from Romania into Hungary, it can get pretty dicey and complicated. And I think as part of the initiative, they're going to have to signal to the international finance community, international construction community and such, that there are steps being taken to kind of minimize those hurdles.